Over Mario's long history in the platforming genre, lives have always been the staple of the franchise, adding the factor of risk during the player's experience. However, losing these lives never really amounted to any major negative consequences other than having to restart a level, world, or missing out on some secret features at the end of the game. Now, I do understand that Mario games are considered a bit on the easier side, but there are still several ways to lose lives, such as being damaged by enemies, falling off the stage, or running out of time that can be extremely frustrating. My name is Copycat, and in today's video, I'm going to go over the worst ways to die in every Mario game. Before I get this video started, if you haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel, and hit that bell button to stay notified when I upload new videos. Super Mario Bros. For the NES was the very first game in the franchise and only had a few frustrating ways to lose a life. The absolute worst would have to be by the hands of the Hammer Bros, who usually show up in pairs and throw their named projectiles towards you. These hammers fly in such a way that make them very hard to dodge, meaning that if you don't deal with this enemy ASAP, then you'll get stuck in a position where it's almost impossible not to take damage. During my countless playthroughs of Super Mario Bros. 2, there's always been one mechanic that's guaranteed me dying at least a few times. This is when you have to use the bombs in either the Mauser boss battle or to break down part of a wall. These bombs are very finicky and quite easily damage you if you place them just slightly off. The only other place in this game where I would die constantly was during the digging sections of levels, as the Shy Guys are very erratic, falling down the pits you've created. If I never have to do this again in a Mario game, I think I'll be okay with that. In Super Mario Bros. 3, the toughest levels in this game are auto-scrollers that take place on tanks, airships, and boats in World 8. Here there are rocky wrenches, which are the main enemies, and they chuck wrenches towards you while you try to platform while also avoiding the cannonballs being fired in your direction. Of course, using a Super Leaf power-up makes these two levels much easier, but without the mechanic of being able to glide, you better be prepared to lose a few lives. In all fairness, Super Mario Land is a much easier game than what's usually expected from the franchise, but there are still a couple of things in the game that can cause you to die. One of these is that Koopas actually explode after you jump on them, which can actually kill you if you're within the blast radius. This mechanic is not apparent at all during your first playthrough, and this isn't really a thing in the original trilogy, as you're expecting the Koopa to go into a shell, allowing you to use it as an item. The other worst way to lose a life in this game is by accidentally touching the Tamao during the Dragon Zamzu boss battle. This strange bubble is actually indestructible, so don't even bother firing at it and avoid it at all costs. Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels is the Japanese sequel to the original game in the series and has always been known as one of the hardest in the franchise. There are many ways for you to lose a life in this game, from running out of time because you can't navigate through the castle maze, to getting killed by the hordes of enemies placed in very annoying spots in each level. On top of all this, power-ups are hard to come by in this game, especially as most of them are replaced by poison mushrooms, which is by far the worst way to die in this one. These mushrooms are really annoying, because if you come in contact with them, they'll deal damage to you or cause you to lose a life. Of course, they are slightly off color than the regulars, so that should be an indicator that something's going on here. Super Mario World is a much bigger game than the previous ones in the series, with many difficult levels and some very hard to face enemies. Even if that's the case, fighting those enemies aren't the worst way to lose a life in this game, as that has to go squarely to Yoshi. Now, of course, Yoshi isn't an enemy, but if he takes any damage at all, then he'll begin to run back and forth frantically. Because Yoshi's such an OP and an important character, you want at all costs to save him, especially in levels that are much more difficult. However, this can put you in very precarious positions, which more often than not will lead you to losing a life. At least he doesn't make that annoying noise that Baby Mario makes in the second game, ugh. Super Mario Land 2 has the biggest risk for losing all your lives out of every single game in the franchise. If this happens to you during your playthrough, then you'll lose every single gold coin you've collected to that point. This is extremely tedious, as you'll then have to go back to every zone and face and defeat every boss a second time. It's interesting that Nintendo decided to add this as a mechanic in this game, as it's something that's never been included in another game in the series before or since. Super Mario 64 was the very first 3D game in the franchise, and drastically changed how the titular character interacted with this environment. Lava would now hurt Mario instead of instantly killing him, and there is now an air meter when swimming underwater which could run out, causing you to lose a life. However, there was one feature in this game that would cause you to die over and over again, and that was the extremely bad camera. There are so many instances where you would try to platform in a tough area and your view would get blocked due to a solid surface, or the camera would start moving in a very strange way, giving you a weird angle to approach your situation. Honestly, this game is a masterpiece and is probably the only downside to it at all. Super Mario Sunshine has two very annoying secret levels where you're more than likely to die a few times during your playthrough. The first of these is the pachinko machine, which I've talked about before in a few previous videos, which sports some broken physics and shoddy camera angles. You'll surely miss your mark a few times and fall out of the bottom of the machine, losing a life. The other secret level, which gives most people problems, is the lily pad ride, where you have to use the FLUDD as a propulsion device, navigating through the tight channels collecting all 8 red coins. It's incredibly easy, however, to miss one of these coins or fall into the water, attempting to collect them, where you're probably gonna have to take the L. New Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo DS was the series' return to 2D platforming, which combined elements of the old games with some new ideas. One of these new additions is the Mini Mushroom, which shrinks Mario down to a very tiny size, allowing him to enter mini warp pipes. It also gives him a much floatier jump and the ability to walk on water. However, this power-up has a major downside, being that one single hit from any enemy will cause you to lose a life. Now, this is a lot easier than you think, as only ground pounding, not bonking off enemies, is the way to defeat them. On top of all this, if you want to warp to specific worlds, you'll have to beat the boss battle in this state, which is pretty hard. Super Mario Galaxy doesn't have the absolute toughest enemies, but does feature some of the most precise platforming you'll ever see from the franchise. You'll almost certainly come across a few incredibly hard sections in several galaxies, which will take you a few tries to complete. However, you won't just fall to your death in this game, and instead you'll get sucked into a black hole that just feels unnerving every time it happens. Getting pulled past the event horizon into seemingly never-ending space isn't exactly something I'm fond of. New Super Mario Bros. Wii was the first game in the franchise to add 4-player co-op, which led to some hilarious, fun, but also frustrating moments. It's almost inevitable that you're gonna get in each other's way from time to time, which will definitely result in you losing a life because of being pushed into an enemy or into a gap. To be honest, there really isn't another way to play this game, just be prepared to get in a few squabbles with family and friends. Super Mario Galaxy 2 has one very specific enemy who is extremely unforgiving, and if you slip up once, will almost definitely result in the loss of a life. These are the cosmic clones that mimic your every move and begin to multiply, covering your screen. Now, if you make a mistake during your platforming, you'll get swarmed by your own shadow, where there's almost no way to escape. These can only appear in a few levels, but also show up when a clone comet orbits a galaxy. Even though Super Mario 3D Land isn't the hardest game of all time, there is one level that's almost guaranteed to make you go insane. This is World S85, which features not only sped up platforms, than obviously what you usually come across, but also a giant cosmic clone chasing you through the stage. These two insane additions to an already difficult level makes for an incredibly frustrating time, where you're more than likely to lose a few lives. New Super Mario Bros. 2 is considered by many as one of the easiest Mario games ever made, and this is amplified by the fact that Nintendo holds the player's hand throughout every world, giving you plenty of power-ups, coins, and extra lives. During my playthrough of the game, I don't even remember losing a life at all, or even coming across the part of the game that gave me any difficulty. I guess the worst way to die in this game is really just any way at all, as something really bad must have happened. I don't know, I really didn't want to include this game in this video, but here we are. New Super Mario Bros. U has an extremely frustrating challenge mode, in specific the levels where you have to avoid collecting coins at all costs. This is really hard, as to gain the gold medal, you can't touch any coins or enemies at all, which is tough as they're laid out in such a way along the path that's easiest to traverse. Now, you don't technically lose a life in this mode, but getting that too bad prompt is just a punch in the gut. Super Mario 3D World is definitely an easier game in the franchise, as you can use both Peach and Rosalina as characters who are insanely overpowered, and power-ups are easily collected which help you greatly in each level. However, if I had to pick one infuriating section in the game where I died several times, I'd have to go with the Grumblump Inferno level, where you have to skillfully maneuver on the block-like object while it turns over in the lava. Now, this is incredibly hard to master, as when you jump and land back on the block, your momentum wants to take you right into the lava. It's funny because I struggled so hard on this, and then I realized that you can just slowly walk instead of jumping. Now, like I discussed in my last video, Super Mario Odyssey ditches the mechanic of lives and instead replaces them with the loss of coins. This takes a lot of risk out of the game, especially now that levels are replaced with kingdoms, and there are checkpoints that allow you to teleport to them at any time. The only time the game's difficult is during the final secret level called A Long Journey's End on the darker side of the moon. Here there are absolutely no checkpoints, meaning that if you die at all during this incredibly long level, then you'll have to start way back at the beginning, which is just a pain in your behind. Alright, so that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one. If you did, please leave a like, comment below what you thought about it, and of course subscribe to my channel. Also, please follow my Instagram at Copycat Gamer, where I upload some cool clips and items from my collection that you won't see anywhere else. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.